In the weeks that followed, the initiative gained momentum, and the factory felt more united than it had in years. People began sharing their own stories, forming a network of support that went beyond the walls of the factory. Jake's life, too, started to find a new rhythm. His family had a stable home, and he felt a renewed sense of purpose, not just as a worker, but as a father, husband, and member of the Tesla community. As for Elon Musk, he quietly observed the changes from a distance, satisfied that the initiative had taken root. When asked later about why he had helped Jake, his response was simple. Sometimes it's not about grand gestures or big ideas. Sometimes it's just about doing what's right. Jake's story became more than just a tale of struggle and generosity. It became a reminder that even in the most challenging times, compassion and support can spark change. It wasn't just Elon Musk's gift that made a difference. It was the way people came together, lifting each other up and proving that no one has to face their battles alone. And as Jake watched his kids play in the backyard of their apartment, a place they now called home, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. The road ahead might still have challenges, but for the first time in a long time, he knew he wasn't walking it alone. The air was thick with the hum of conversation and the clinking of glasses as the opulent ballroom glimmered with golden chandeliers and the flash of cameras. It was one of the most exclusive galas of the year, a gathering where power, influence, and wealth converged under one roof. Politicians, business tycoons, and celebrities mingled effortlessly, their laughter masking the subtle undercurrents of rivalry that always seemed to accompany such events. Amid the grandeur, two names stood out in the crowd, each carrying their own weight of expectation and controversy: Hunter Biden and Barron Trump. Hunter Biden entered the room with his signature confident stride, his sharp suit tailored to perfection. His presence alone turned heads, as whispers of his recent controversies seemed to follow him wherever he went. He had a charm about him, a natural charisma that drew people in. But tonight, there was something different in his demeanor, something sharper, more deliberate. Across the room stood Barron Trump, taller and more reserved than many had expected. At just 18, he carried himself with a quiet dignity, his youthful face betraying little emotion. Though he often avoided the public eye, his every move was scrutinized by the media, eager to draw comparisons to his father's brash persona. Tonight, however, Barron seemed unfazed by the attention, his focus unwavering as he navigated the room with a surprising level of poise. The tension between the two had been simmering for weeks. While the world speculated about the next moves of their famous families, Hunter and Barron had largely kept their distance from one another until now. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly, as Hunter's gaze lingered on Barron a moment too long. Then came the pointed remarks, cloaked in polite humor but sharp enough to cut. Those nearby chuckled nervously, unsure of whether to laugh or step away from the brewing storm. Hunter's words, though veiled, were aimed directly at Barron, testing the young man's composure in a room full of onlookers. Barron didn't respond at first, his calm demeanor unshaken. But the room seemed to hold its breath, sensing that something was about to unfold. The tension grew palpable as Hunter, emboldened by the lack of immediate retaliation, took another verbal jab, this one louder, drawing the attention of even those who had been too engrossed in their own conversations to notice. And then something unexpected happened. Barron finally turned to face Hunter, his expression unreadable. The room fell silent, as if everyone collectively realized they were about to witness something extraordinary. Slowly, Barron's lips parted, and he began to speak. His voice, steady and measured, carried across the room with an authority that belied his age. What he said next left everyone stunned, shifting the entire energy of the gala in an instant. The room seemed frozen in time, the anticipation thick enough to cut with a knife. All eyes were on Barron as he stood tall, his calm yet piercing gaze fixed on Hunter. For a moment, it felt as though the world outside the gala had faded away, leaving only this charged exchange between two figures who couldn't have been more different. What Barron said wasn't loud or exaggerated. It was sharp, clear, and disarming in a way that no one expected. "You know," Barron began, his tone unhurried but deliberate, "people often mistake silence for weakness. But sometimes it's the loudest voice in the room that reveals the most insecurity." The crowd murmured in astonishment. It wasn't just what Barron said, but how he said it, unshaken, composed, and completely undeterred by the older man's attempts to undermine him. Hunter, who had been riding high on the momentum of his earlier remarks, seemed momentarily caught off guard. But he recovered quickly, his smirk returning as he leaned in slightly, as if challenging Barron to continue. And Barron did. "You've been through your share of challenges, Mr. Biden," he continued, his voice steady but with a subtle edge. "I imagine it must be exhausting to carry the weight of public scrutiny. But maybe tonight isn't the night to project that weight onto someone else." A ripple of quiet gasps spread through the audience. Barron's words were measured, even empathetic, but they carried an undeniable power. For a young man who rarely spoke in public, let alone confronted someone as seasoned as Hunter, his composure was nothing short of remarkable. Hunter's smile faltered, his eyes narrowing slightly. He wasn't used to being challenged so openly, especially not by someone half his age. But instead of retreating, he doubled down, his voice taking on a mocking tone. "Well, it seems the Trump family taught you how to deliver a speech. Maybe you're hoping to follow in your father's footsteps someday." The remark hung in the air, cutting through the thick silence. A few nervous chuckles came from the edges of the crowd, but most people watched in stunned silence, waiting to see how Barron would respond. Barron didn't flinch. If anything, he seemed even more resolute. "Leadership isn't about following footsteps," he replied calmly. "It's about knowing when to stand still and hold your ground, even when others try to knock you down." The words struck a chord, resonating far beyond the immediate exchange. There was an unspoken understanding in the room now, a sense that this wasn't just about a verbal sparring match. It was about two worlds colliding, two legacies clashing in a way that symbolized much more than just personal rivalry. As the exchange continued, the tension only grew. Some of the attendees began to shift uncomfortably, while others leaned in, captivated by the unfolding drama. For Hunter, this was an unexpected challenge, and he struggled to maintain his usual air of confidence. Barron, on the other hand, seemed to thrive under the pressure, his quiet strength earning him newfound respect from those who had underestimated him. Meanwhile, whispers began circulating among the crowd, speculating about the deeper motivations behind this confrontation. Was Hunter trying to settle an old score with the Trump family? Or was he simply looking to make headlines at someone else's expense? And what about Barron? Was this his way of stepping out of his father's shadow? Or was he simply defending himself in the face of unwarranted criticism? As the night wore on, the atmosphere became increasingly charged. The stakes felt higher with every passing moment, as though this exchange would somehow set the tone for the future of both families. And yet, amidst all the tension and speculation, there was an undeniable sense of anticipation. Everyone in the room knew they were witnessing something extraordinary, and they couldn't wait to see how it would unfold. Just when it seemed like the moment couldn't get any more intense, an unexpected interruption changed everything. A figure stepped forward from the crowd, their presence commanding immediate attention. It wasn't clear at first who they were or what they intended, but their arrival sent a ripple through the room, shifting the focus and adding yet another layer of intrigue to an already electrifying evening. As the room held its collective breath, the figure stepping forward was none other than one of the event's co-hosts, a well-known philanthropist who had built a reputation for diffusing tense moments with grace. Dressed impeccably, they raised a hand, signaling for calm, and spoke with a voice that carried both authority and warmth. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's not lose sight of why we're here tonight. This evening is about unity, about building bridges, not walls." The words were well-meaning, but they hung awkwardly in the air, unable to fully dissipate the tension that still crackled between Hunter and Barron. The crowd seemed torn between returning to their polite conversations or continuing to watch the unfolding drama. Sensing this, the philanthropist turned directly to Hunter and Barron, their tone softening. "You both represent two very different perspectives, but tonight, perhaps we can focus on what connects us rather than what divides us." Barron nodded respectfully, his composed demeanor unshaken. "I couldn't agree more," he said, his voice carrying the weight of sincerity. "Differences shouldn't divide us, they should challenge us to grow." His response drew a smattering of applause, a subtle but significant shift in the room's energy. Hunter, too, seemed to realize that the moment had reached a tipping point. Whatever his initial intentions had been, it was clear that continuing down this path would only deepen the divide. He took a step back, his expression softening just enough to suggest a hint of self-reflection. "You're right," he admitted, his voice quieter now. "Sometimes in trying to prove a point, we forget what really matters." The philanthropist smiled, sensing the tension begin to ebb. "Then let's all raise a glass," they suggested, lifting their own flute of champagne, to the idea that even when we disagree, we can still find common ground. The crowd eagerly seized the opportunity to shift the mood, lifting their glasses and clinking them together in a wave of toasts. Conversations began to flow again, the earlier confrontation fading into the background, but leaving behind a sense of something meaningful having occurred. Barron and Hunter exchanged one final glance. It wasn't one of animosity, but of mutual acknowledgement, an unspoken understanding that their encounter had been a lesson for both of them, and perhaps for everyone watching. As the evening progressed, the focus returned to the gala's purpose, raising funds for a cause larger than any individual. Both Hunter and Barron found themselves drawn into other conversations, their earlier tension replaced by the buzz of a room united in philanthropy. Yet their exchange lingered in the minds of those who had witnessed it, sparking discussions about leadership, legacy, and the power of standing firm without resorting to division. By the end of the night, the incident had already begun to take on a life of its own. Social media buzzed with clips and commentary, the moment serving as a reminder that even the most seemingly opposed figures could find common ground when they chose to rise above their differences. As Barron exited the ballroom, he paused briefly at the door, glancing back at the glittering scene behind him. He wasn't just leaving a gala. He was stepping into a new chapter of his life, one where he would no longer be just a shadow of his family name, but a figure with his own voice and purpose. And as for Hunter, he too left the event with much to think about, his usual bravado tempered by the quiet strength of someone far younger, but wise beyond his years. Sometimes the most powerful moments aren't the loudest or the most dramatic. They're the ones that remind us of our shared humanity, even amidst the complexities of public life. And on that night, in that room filled with power and prestige, it was a young man's quiet dignity that left the deepest impression.